Do you want to understand the difference between what is your affect and what is your emotion? What your body tells you and what your brain tells you, and how we learn that. So interesting, yeah? Well, stay with us because today Dr. Fabrice Nye is going to come and talk to us about this difference and how actually this understanding will help us to create peace with us and peace with others. So, welcome. Stay with us in Emotions in Harmony. Living in harmony is possible if you know your emotions and how to handle them. I am Dr. Carmen Román, and I will share with you the current psychology by myself or by interviewing experts who will inspire you. Learn how to live a life of fullness and how to recover your emotional harmony. Welcome to Emotions in Harmony. Hey guys, welcome back. Let me introduce you to Fabrice Nye. Dr. Fabrice is a licensed psychologist with a private practice in the Silicon Valley. He has been working with cognitive behavior therapy. He was the host for Dr. David Burns, the podcast that he created. Fabrice created this podcast with him for 4 years, and it was really a success. But now, Fabrice has his own podcast called Peace at Last. He is there to discuss scientific latest research in psychology and neuroscience. And you will listen to from him today this explanation. He has a talent to explain to open concepts in psychology that you want to keep listening and listening. So give us a little time because in the conversation we start just talking and going around, but after 2-3 minutes, we really got into a meaningful, profound conversation. Fabrice and I are the graduates of the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. This is how we met. His approach to psychology is blending clinical skills with spiritual principles. He was an engineer, he has a background in aviation, and he can bring the left brain science to clarity in order to understand these complex human processes. So I will let you in the show notes. You will see his podcast. You will have his email if you want to contact him. And for now, I want you to stay with us. Really, if you are driving, if you are cooking, if you are gardening, or whatever, enjoy this episode. Enjoy it because I promise you, at the end, you will understand how to create this peace for yourself, how to quiet your brain. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, here we go. Hey, my dear friends, I'm so happy you are now in this interview and this episode. And as I told you, Fabrice Nye is my loving, dear old friend. Yay. And
Hi.
you listen from him. He was actually my first guest in the Emotions in Harmony. Fabrice, you were the first one in our podcast, and let me tell you, you were doing great, and you are doing great.
Good. It was good to hear that I brought some listeners to your podcast, so I was pleased to hear that.
If you are listening to this episode or watching in YouTube, please go to the very first. We are going to put a link here to the very first interview because people love that interview. It's probably the most listened to interview in our podcast.
Wow.
So
yeah, if I remember, that's where I was talking about the basics of how we feel the way we think.
Yeah.
Which is really what I work from when I work with clients.
And
yeah,
today we are actually going to talk about emotions. Sorry, I interrupt you.
No, it's I guess that today is kind of a follow-up in a way because
Mm-hmm.
we talk about feeling. I'm sure you talk about this all the time since your podcast is on emotions.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit similar in English and in Spanish, where we talk about emotions and we talk about feelings. In Spanish would be emociones y sentidos.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Y
but
sentimientos.
sentimientos
Uh-huh.
and it can be a little bit ambiguous. And I've taken the step in my practice to mostly use the word emotions because I think it's better defined and people understand that better. Have you ever had the occasion in your practice to ask one of your clients, "Well, how are you feeling?"
And they respond with a thought.
Yes, I feel like
I think
I'm going to
90%.
die. I feel like you're bothering me. I feel
Yes. And 95% of the time,
yes.
like, how do you feel? And they respond with a thought.
I know. And so people don't really know what feeling means. And so
Yeah.
I try not to use the word feel or feelings. I mean, I use it sometimes because it's necessary, but I
Uh-huh.
said, so what emotion are you experiencing?
Ah,
And then it gets
okay.
them to think because that's a question they typically don't
Uh-huh.
get.
Yeah.
And they're kind of stumped sometimes. Some people don't
Yeah.
really know what an emotion is, but they
Yeah.
don't know that they have them all the time.
Yes. Actually, you asked me 2 days ago by email the list of emotions in Spanish.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
because
I don't have one, um, but the Spanish language, we I think we are more adjusted with the words about emotions than the English language.
I'm pretty sure you are.
Mm-hmm.
I do a podcast and I have a practice where I work with English speakers. So you have to take the language into consideration.
Yeah.
My native language is French, and
Mm-hmm.
in French, there's not a big distinction between emotion and feeling. It's just people know what we're talking about. So you don't really need to make that distinction as much. But when I did my episode on emotions, I published a list in English of feeling words,
Mm-hmm.
and people really like this. This comes from originally from NVC, nonviolent communication.
Uh-huh.
But I like to give people those feeling words because it gives them a vocabulary to talk about their emotions.
Yes.
Uh, you know, Otherwise people say, well, I feel okay, I don't feel okay, I feel bad, I feel good, I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy, I'm unhappy. It's kind of vague,
Yeah.
but when you give people things to talk about where they say, well, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling rejected and loved, I'm feeling embarrassed, I'm nervous. And so they start to develop a better vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that I want to talk about today is that a broader vocabulary makes you better able to monitor and regulate your emotions.
I can see, Fabrice, or I can hear when I have a client. I have different group therapies, groups for therapy. So after a year, I put them in a special group
Hmm.
because they are more able to describe what is going on with them.
Yeah,
They are more precise, clear. I am feeling this here inside. I'm feeling sad. I am feeling last. I don't have hope. All of these kind of more precise things.
yeah,
The anger is in my hands, or I feel my hair tied, or in the beginning is a lot of education around it.
I agree. I
Mm-hmm.
agree. And it's really important education because it helps people not just, be better able to do therapy, but also better able to do their emotional life.
Yeah.
Because when I can not only tell others, but tell myself what I'm experiencing, uh, I, I know more about me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how helpful it is. Yeah.
For example, in English, in Spanish too, there's a difference between red and pink.
Yeah.
And if you have a language where there's no word for pink, you're just going to say it's light red. And it's just going to be another shade of red. So you're going to say it's red,
Yeah.
just lighter.
Yeah.
Just like we don't have a word for light blue in English. So there's blue and light blue. It's all blue. But in other languages, you have a word for light blue. And for those people, it's a different color.
Yeah.
Well, emotion words are like that, where if you can distinguish between, feeling frustrated and feeling defeated, or feeling stumped or stuck, or, and none of those are coming to me right now, but there's a whole list. They're all similar but distinct. And so that allows you to have more nuances.
Yeah. Yeah. So you are talking about our feelings. We experience our feelings also based in our culture.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now, this is hard to demonstrate because we are immersed in a culture. You're probably familiar with the notion of Schadenfreude. This is a feeling word that has been imported into English rather recently. It comes from German. It's the type of good feeling you experience when somebody else is having bad fortune.
Oh, really? No,
Yes,
I am not familiar with that.
you haven't heard.
Like, yeah, you are dancing because
Yeah,
they are going bad.
exactly. Yes. So,
Wow.
and so in English, you use the German word Schadenfreude,
Uh-huh.
but it's a word that didn't exist in English, but now people know it, and so it becomes this new concept.
Yeah.
And it's no longer, I feel, because you can't really say, well, I rejoice at somebody else's misfortune.
It's too
Because
long to say it.
it's wrong to say that. But if you say, I'm experiencing Schadenfreude, people are going to go, ah,
Okay.
they get it,
Uh-huh. Actually, maybe for somebody who is bilingual, it's not that foreign concept. Maybe the ones who are bilingual, we understand what you say. Like I understand, I can feel differently when I'm in Spanish than in English.
Yeah. Yes. And bilingualism is an extremely useful
Uh-huh.
skill to have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any children, but I know that if I had children, I would have taught them a second language from day one.
Yeah, immediately, yeah.
Um, and when I grew up, I was speaking French as my native language, but I was living in Corsica. And Corsica has its own local language, which is kind of a blend of French, Spanish, and Italian. And so I always knew, and I heard my grandparents speaking it, so I knew there was another way to say things. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew some of the words, even though my parents didn't speak it at home. So it's always been in my consciousness. And when I started learning English when I was 10 years old, it was just one more language.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started learning Spanish when I was 13, it was just one more language. It was just like, no, yes, just languages, different ways to say things. And so I always knew that my language was not the only way to say things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And even in many languages, words will not do justice to our feelings.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I remember when I start speaking English and I start um, having an emotional relationship in with my first husband. I wanted to fight,
Mm.
and because he didn't speak Spanish, it was not the same. I wanted to fight. I wanted to real fight, like
Yeah.
wow. And no, I needed to think. It was just too slow. I could translate, and I mean, in Spanish we say fighting more lightly. Yeah, I mean we are to have a discussion. I will say,
Yeah.
and a passionate argument about something,
Yeah.
because we love passionate arguments. Yeah,
Yes.
but here it was like, oh, let me think about it. Let me, and it was not only the language. It was not my lack of English. It was the lack of words in English, but
Yeah.
also anyway in general. It was the lack of the not justice that our language does to our body. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
And so I want to say something about language and kind of tie this into emotions.
Okay.
Um, and the research that I wanted to talk about today by Lisa Feldman Barrett is it came from her initial research when she was a postdoc fellow. She she wanted to study uh, emotional responses, and so she went to find out, well, how do we determine what emotion somebody is experiencing? And she went by the classical view at the time, which was what follows. Number one, that there's a set of basic emotions, and when you ask people, they say, oh, fear, sadness, joy, disgust, anger. And those emotions are universal. Every human being on the planet experiences it. There's even some overlap with other mammals who also experience some variation of those emotions, and that it's not culturally um, specific. And the other thing was that emotions um, have like a neurological blueprint. For example, when you feel fear, there's some activation in the amygdala and other brain centers, and sadness is some other sets. And so you can take a fMRI picture of your brain with a particular emotion, and you'll say, okay, that's the emotion. And also those emotions can be read on your face and your body language by anybody in the world. So that was the classical view.
Uh-huh.
And she could not find ways to verify that was the case.
Yeah.
Now, there's been some research that seems to validate the classical view, and some of the best known are by Paul Ekman. You're familiar with Paul Ekman?
No, you are throwing me names that I am
Oh,
not.
okay. So Paul
Oh.
Ekman went out to prove that there's a set of basic emotions,
Mhm.
and he went into some remote cultures, who are not exposed to the Western culture at all. And
Mhm.
sure enough, they express those emotions or they recognize them.
Mhm.
So that seemed to be a very validating study.
Mhm.
But when Lisa Feldman Barrett looked into it, she realized that the way they were measuring, quote unquote, measuring the recognition of emotion was they were presenting some faces of actors.
That were
So
kind of exaggerating the emotion.
yes, so they had somebody say, okay, make a sad face,
Uh-huh.
like frown like this, and
Mhm.
turn down your
Mhm.
your mouth. And then some other people said, okay, now make an excited face. And so they had to open their
Uh-huh.
eyes and open their mouth and raise their eyebrows. And so they showed their faces to the other people in those cultures, and they gave them a set of words to choose from to for them to decide which emotion they were seeing.
Uh-huh.
Not only that, but it was with the experimenter present. And there was like some subtle cues that, nah, you didn't really choose the proper one, because they were doing some selection,
Mm-hmm.
pre-selection of the participants.
Yeah,
So what she found was that the way the study was done
it was not
was
that clean.
it was funneling those people, whether they were from
Mhm.
a Western culture or not,
Yeah.
into seeing the emotion exactly like a Western person would see it.
Mm. I have the privilege to work with indigenous people, mainly from the south part of Mexico, from Oaxaca,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
or or other countries that have indigenous background. And let me tell you, their way of expressing emotions is so I call it with a lot of dignity. They may be in deep, deep pain, in deep anger, and you cannot tell.
Yeah.
You cannot tell by their face. It's a very subtle movement, eye movement, breathing, etc., that a fellow in this country will totally miss.
Yeah.
You can even say the person is being bored or it doesn't pay attention, but they are actually in deep anger, for example.
Yes.
So yeah, we don't express emotions the same
But
way.
without having to go to a different culture, if you take two perfectly, California raised Western people here, and you look at them, and one of them is sad and the other one is sad, and they will look different.
Mm-hmm.
One will be sad and will start crying. The other one will just be stone-faced.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Completely different expression. And yes,
Yes.
they're both feeling sadness.
Yes.
So there's no fixed blueprint.
No.
So how can we say that sadness is sadness? Well, it's a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say cultural, not just at the, you know, uh, regional or national level, but also at the family level.
Mm-hmm.
So so let's say I'm an infant and I I don't know what an emotion is. Now
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean I don't feel anything inside. Lisa Feldman talks about something called affect, and I kind of need to define this because it's a little bit different from what we call affect in psychotherapy. In psychotherapy, we affect is something that is visible in the expression of a client.
Mm-hmm.
But affect is really what we experience inside. And affect is composed of two dimensions. One dimension is pleasant versus unpleasant. It's called valence. And the other dimension is arousal, meaning calm versus agitated. And there was some research that was done on this. In fact, if you could put a link in your show notes
Mm-hmm.
to my episode on emotions, people will see that I have a diagram of the affects.
Yeah, I will. Mm-hmm.
And I'll bring this up just to be able to talk about it while looking at it.
Uh-huh.
So the research was done by Jim Russell of University of British Columbia, and he selected a set of 28 feeling words, and he tried to make them more or less dispersed on the affect scale
Mm-hmm.
to kind of measure how they spread around. And he called the result the circumplex model of affect, with the valence axis horizontal and the arousal axis vertical. And so one example of high valence, meaning pleasure, and high arousal would be delighted or excited. Those are feeling words that are high on both. Something that is low on valence but high on arousal would be afraid or tense.
Mm.
I'm still aroused, but it's not pleasant at all.
Yeah. Okay.
I can be low on arousal and still low on valence. Those would be like depressed, gloomy, bored.
Nihilism in the philosophy, yeah, being in an empty. void space.
Yeah. And then if I'm high on valence but low on arousal, those would be words like serene, calm, relaxed.
Mm.
Those are pleasurable but low in arousal. So that's affect. And if you take out the words, the affect is something that you can feel in an interoceptive manner, about interoception. This is the sense of our internal sensations.
Yeah.
And so if affect exists from the moment we're born, probably before that. But from affect to emotion, there's a step. And that step is cultural. So let's say I'm in the terrible twos, and my mother is giving me my dinner, and I'm just having a tantrum and just throwing my dinner on the floor. And mommy says, "Oh, Fabrice is angry." And so I hear the word angry, and I put that in my head. I make an association between what I feel, which is a lot of arousal, quite a bit of displeasure. Not so much. Anger is not that unpleasant most of the time. But I go, okay, that's angry. And then, sometime later, I hear my mother yelling at my sister and saying, "I'm angry with you." And so I put that in my head. Okay, that also is angry, and that's the way it manifests when I see somebody else doing it. Then a little bit later, I see a man in the store, and he sneezes, and I go, "Angry?" Mommy says, no, he's sneezing. And I go, oh, okay, so that does not belong in that concept. And so over time, millions of times, I create this concept of angry. And that's how it coalesces, because of the input I've received from my parents, from my environment, and how it's been validated or invalidated by external feedback. So that I go from this particular set of affects into a notion, we can call it a concept or a category of emotion. So that's how we create emotions. And it's...
So that's how we create the concept of emotions, yeah?
Yeah, but an emotion is a concept. Remember, the affect is there. The circumstances are there, but I create a category out of it.
A name for it, okay.
A name for it. So
the emotion is the name.
Yes. If you read Lisa Feldman's book, which is called How Emotions Are Made, which really says what it means.
Which we will put the link here.
We put a link in there because
How emotions are made.
Yes. When I forgot what I was going to say, but anyway, so she talks about how a concept and a category are the same thing. And she also talks about how our brain makes predictions. And the predictions are based on our concept. So let's say I see somebody who's trying to open my car door. My brain starts making prediction of anger. It starts creating some adrenaline in my body, getting me ready to yell at the guy or beat him up. So the brain is making those predictions. And I'm experiencing the emotion of anger because it relates to hundreds or thousands of times when I've experienced that emotion before. It's part of that category, and I make predictions based on that concept.
Yeah.
Now, when we make predictions, and we make predictions all the time. Lisa Barrett also has a TED Talk. In the TED Talk, she goes like this. She says, now your brain is making predictions every millisecond, and it's anticipating the next word that's going to come out of my
Uh-huh.
What's the next word?
Mouth.
Yes. So that's the prediction.
Uh-huh.
What if I had said, it's anticipating the next word that's going to come out of my nose? You have to do a double take and
Uh-huh. And
your
like,
brain
no,
goes,
that's not true.
what did he say? Let me reconfigure here something.
Yeah.
So when the world does not match our prediction, we have to reset. And that takes some energy out of us. Our brain consumes more glucose. We have to, maybe the adrenaline. So let's say I see this guy trying to open my car door, and I reach the guy, and he turns to me and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was my car." And suddenly I have to reconfigure. It's like, oh, I'm not angry at him. He's just like this poor guy who he looks like he's in his 80s, and he doesn't really know what his car looks like. He's lost in the parking lot. And so suddenly I feel maybe some guilt because I was angry at him, and some compassion because he's like kind of lost. So I have to undo all the hormonal changes in my body and create new ones that match the new situation.
So what as you are talking, I am picturing in my mind an adult that is angry.
Yes.
Or is extremely sad because of grief or something.
Yes.
And the child say, "Mommy, are you angry?" And the mom smile and say, "No." So what happened there?
So
But we are confusing the child, yeah. But
yeah. So if the mother is actually is angry, but denies it, the child is going to have to make some conclusion, inferences out of it. Okay. Okay. So sometimes we can look angry, but we're not angry. And so put that in my memory bank.
Yeah.
Now, yes, it could be confusing because we're introducing an inconsistency.
Yeah.
But, confusion is not necessarily a bad thing.
It's just new information.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's very useful to realize that emotions are not cast in stone, because if you apply the principle that the brain is very malleable, you can realize, well, I'm not stuck with these emotions. Number one, you can do the nuancing. You can learn how to have more refined understanding of your emotions. When when I work with my clients, I I give them this CBT type of form where they write down how they feel, and the way they do this is by circling some feeling words that I have in the form, and it's not exhaustive, but it's got quite a few of them, and so that helps them be more used to using different feeling words for their emotions. Like there's a set of anger-like emotions where there's angry, mad, resentful, annoyed, irritated, upset, furious. These are all on the anger spectrum, but they have different nuances. So then they become better able to say, well, yeah, I'm a little bit ticked off, but I'm not really angry. I'm just annoyed. And so they can tell the difference. But if they had only one word for that, it would just be anger.
Yeah.
And so there's no way to modulate, to regulate.
Yeah. Yeah. And annoyed is very different than, it's like pink and red. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
It's
very
like pink and
different
red.
than angry.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been fascinated by that research.
Yeah.
And so, I see you're petting your cat.
Yeah, she loves to be in the videos.
Yeah.
She is my
What,
first number one assistant.
what's her name?
She's Della, and many people already know her and know her picture.
Isela.
She sometimes she just pops the tail
Ah,
in the
yes.
videos, and sometimes she just comes and say hello. She's having a lot of great time with you because she's just relaxing there.
Hmm. I love cats. And
Mhm.
cats, like us, have affect.
Yeah.
You can tell when your cat is pleased or when your cat is not pleased.
Yes.
You can tell when your cat is aroused and when your cat is calm.
Uh-huh.
Um, so they have affect,
Yes.
but they don't have emotions.
They don't have the concept of it.
That's right.
Okay.
There's no concept.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. So do you think concept, I will say concept make us interesting human beings,
Yes.
but also can complicate stuff.
Yes.
I mean, the complication is the beautiful part, yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Hmm. And I'm as you're talking, I am thinking, I'm so blessed that I grew up in a family who read. But there are many families that they don't have the lecture, they don't have the vocabulary in their own language.
Yeah.
And when they don't have the vocabulary, it could be that they go more toward frustration when they
Yeah.
cannot create that emotion, that concept.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
I totally agree because it impoverishes your range of experience if
Mhm.
you don't have as many concepts.
Mhm.
Not only that, but just like when I was talking about anger, if you put everything under the anger umbrella, um, you start putting things in there that don't really fit. And um, I talk in my podcast about some of the cognitive distortions, and one of them is called labeling.
Mhm.
And labeling is in part giving a word to a situation or to a circumstance or a person. And if that word is really accurate and describes really well the situation, great. It's very useful.
Mhm.
I like to talk about even just a simple concept as a table. So I have a table in front of me, and it's useful for me to talk about a table because I know I can put stuff on the table.
Mhm.
I know that if it's high enough, I can eat on it,
Mhm.
and things like this. It's got all kinds of useful things. But let's say that I need to sit down, and there's no chair around. So concept chair.
Mhm.
There's nothing that fits my concept of chair, and I don't really want to sit on the floor. But there's a table, and I go, well, I'm not going to sit on the table because it's a table.
Mhm.
You don't sit on tables, you sit on chairs.
Mhm.
And so I'm compartmentalizing my experience because I put a label on that thing that I call a table. But if I don't call it anything, and I notice that I can just put my butt on it,
Yeah.
um, then it doesn't matter what it is.
Mhm.
Again, I can decide to call that a chair if I want to.
Uh-huh.
So labeling is useful for communication and for understanding my own experience, but it's also limiting because
Yeah.
it takes one word and it summarizes a very infinitely complex experience into one word.
Mhm. Mhm. That makes sense. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's the way I will say is labels make us to be a little bit less conflict at the beginning, but then it can be problematic if they are stuck with it. Yeah. If I am
yeah,
stuck with the label.
yeah,
Hmm. And we tend to label people when we met them.
yeah, yeah. It's built in.
Yeah.
We need to associate what we experience
Mm-hmm.
with some prior experience.
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
ever noticed, you go to, let's say you've never been to Costa Rica,
Mm-hmm.
and you go to Costa Rica and you walk in the jungle and say, oh, this is wonderful. And then inevitably you or somebody else will say, oh, it reminds me of Hawaii. So suddenly it's no longer its own unique experience. It gets connected to prior experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we do that automatically.
Yes.
And it has some really useful sides, and it also has some limiting sides.
Yeah.
And knowing that allows you to say, well, right now I just want to have a pure, unique experience. Later, maybe if I want to talk about it, I can use connected experiences so that people can better relate to mine.
So those labels are kind of quieting the mind, or are kind of lowering the irritation of the new experience. Yeah. Um, I found it beautiful, as long as we know it's just a temporary thing. It's a sticky it's a sticky a sticky post. It's not a fixed label. Yeah. This last weekend we were with my husband and another of his coworkers. We were to Austin, Texas. And when we left the airplane, we were walking in the airport, and we all start talking about experiences of Texas. Like the question was, have you been before in Texas? And I said, yes, I have been in Houston. And then we all naturally start bringing experiences of Texas. Before we even get out of the airport. Yeah.
So you were already in Texas before you get out of the airport, yes.
So, but I was coloring my experience of Austin by my previous experiences.
Yeah.
And this is that we humans do that. Yeah?
Yes, we do. And like I was explaining earlier, your brain starts making predictions.
Yes.
Like, for example, if you see this, guy in cowboy boots and cowboy hat walking by, you'll go, yes, that's what I expected. It's Texas. But if you see, this hippie in dreadlocks and, Birkenstocks, you're going, so you're taking a double take because your prediction is not being matched.
Yes. Yes. And I actually noticed that when we were walking, because it's like, oh my God, I am not even open to know Austin. Yeah. Because I have my experience of Houston, and I was listening what they were saying. Like, just wait. We want to experience Austin. Yeah. It's a very human thing.
It is. It is. And there's no judgment on that.
No.
But it's good to know it so that if it gets in your way of your own happiness, and that's really what I'm about, if it gets in the way of your own happiness, then it's good to know that there's a different way to do it.
Yeah. Yes. And if we are aware, we can indulge on it. Yeah, we can say, okay, I am bringing my previous experiences, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be that way. So I can prevent some disappointment. I can be open for curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is it meditation or some practices allowing us to be in the affect longer before we create emotion?
Yes, actually, I agree with that. I think that if you have a mindfulness type of practice, and when I say mindfulness, a lot of people picture, people sitting in meditation with their eyes closed. Mindfulness is a very wide range of practices. It's really about paying attention to what's happening and suspending judgment long enough to receive the full experience. So that's mindfulness. And this can be practiced. I'm not a big meditator. I've tried many times to have a meditation practice. It just doesn't really work for me. But I tend to be mindful because when I notice there's a disturbance in my emotion, in my affect, to be precise, I pay attention. Oh, my affect is being disturbed. Why is that? Oh, it's because, and I don't know, somebody is saying something that's triggering some other past experience, I create an observer part of me that just watched the whole thing. Okay. And I pause long enough to ask myself the question, is this how I want to react to this?
Mm-hmm.
Now, doesn't mean that I change my reaction, but at least I know that when I'm reacting, it just comes with the territory. I'm
Yes.
not a slave to it.
Yes. And that, my friend, will create peace at last.
Yes, it will create peace at last. Exactly. That's what I'm hoping.
Yes.
I don't know if, so you have mentioned, I imagine in your intro that this
Yes.
is the name of my current
This is
podcast. I
this
just
is the
started it a month
podcast.
ago.
I totally get it. Why you took us through this journey of understanding Lisa Feldman Barrett
Yeah.
concepts and theory, because this is the way we create peace for us.
Yes.
Peace at last is if I can manage to understand that this guy that I am meeting right now, um, I am I am bringing my story. I am bringing whatever I know to have um, a label. Yeah,
Yes.
I understand that I brought this stuff, and I can be open and meet the person.
Yes.
Yeah, because many of my clients say every man, all the men in the earth are bad men. And I was joking
Exactly.
yesterday in one group because I was like, no, not all of them. And they start laughing and like, we're like, really not all of them? Like, no, but you need to be aware to be open to meet new people. Yeah. And,
Yes.
and not to bring your story with it. So yeah, that is peace at last.
Um, you know, that brings up something else because I've been a long time student of Baron Katie.
Uh-huh.
And so for 20 years, I've been following her teachings and using her techniques. And she explains that we don't see people, we see our story of them. And so one
Mhm.
of the examples she gives is this. Let's say I'm sitting in my living room. It's the morning, and my wife is walking through the living room, just normally, and she doesn't even pay attention to me. She walks by, and I look at her. I'm going, she's so wonderful. She's just a beautiful person. I love her so much. Look at her. She's just has such a nice demeanor, and oh gosh, I feel so good. So that's one story.
Yeah.
Same situation.
Mhm.
My wife walks through the living room, and she's just being herself, not even paying attention to me. And I'm looking at her and I'm going, she didn't say good morning. She didn't even glance in my direction. She's ignoring me.
Mhm.
She's probably in one of her moods, man. See,
Uh-huh.
that's the
Yeah.
other story.
That's the other story.
No
And
difference. I'm
all
just
of
seeing
them are
her
my
through
stories. Yeah.
through the filter of my own
Yeah.
understanding.
Yes.
So it's good to suspend understanding now and then just to see what comes through.
Yes. Yes. Fabrice, I think really by bringing these topics and by calling the attention to keep studying us as human beings. Yeah.
Yeah.
You are going to do a wonderful things with your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank
I
you.
think so. Yeah. It's truly needed that we just stop and help ourselves to see differently.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. And I know that you're doing a lot of good with your podcast. I especially appreciate that you're doing this in English and in Spanish. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm not as familiar with the Spanish-speaking world as you are, of course, but I
Mhm.
imagine that a lot of the resources that we have available are published in English,
Yeah.
and so it's good to have that in a language that other people can benefit from. Not everyone speaks English.
Yeah.
It's not the language of the entire world, and for this very reason, I'm hoping to do one in French at some point. So
Yeah. And as a psychologist who I was trained first in Spanish, let me tell you, there is a lot of wonderful theories that come from Latino countries that are not being translated into English because they
yes.
are being born in the struggle of the revolution,
Hmm.
in the struggle of hunger and poverty and all of
Yeah.
this. And they are extremely beautiful theories that can help us here in this country too. So sometimes the translation also goes back. Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree.
Yeah.
That's so
Which I am
true.
sure is the same for French.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, if you have nothing else to add, is that okay to conclude now, or you have something else
Yeah,
to
no,
say?
I mean, I think that this covered what I was trying to explain, that,
Mm-hmm.
things are not as set in stone as people might think. And
Mm-hmm.
so I hope that that gives a sense of more freedom and possibility.
I think so. It gave me.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
It gave me this
I'm,
sense of, yeah, I am going to be aware of my stories. Yeah.
yes,
And the beautiful part is I can suspend them for a little while.
yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Fabrice. And I wish you the best in your new podcast. I know you had the other podcast that you hosted for 3-4 years, the other podcast. We are going to put all the links to your new podcast. I know people will love it.
Great. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate having a chance to speak with you. For people who don't know, we went to the same school, and
Yes.
so we have this um, commonality of thinking about psychology. But
Yes.
I don't get to talk to you very often, so
No. I
it
think we
was
talk when
quite a
we are in the
pleasure.
microphone.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
We went to the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology together, and um, it helps to have a different view on spirituality,
Yeah.
on human beings, rather than the only mainstream psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really helps.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Helps me. Okay.
yes.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Carmen.
Yeah, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for being until the end of this interview with Dr. Fabrice Nye. I hope you enjoyed as much as we did. As we did, because Stella is here with me, my cat, and she truly enjoyed this interview. She was just relaxing and listening because Fabrice's voice is so peaceful. Yeah, no wonder why. Now I know why he put Peace at Last, the name in his podcast. So now I want to remind you, if you are listening to this episode, remember the last month or so, we separated the podcast. Now, if you want to listen in Spanish, go and subscribe to the podcast Armonía Emocional. Same content sometimes, just in different language, or different content if I find a therapist that doesn't speak the English, and I can bring you sometimes the content in English, but sometimes it's different. It's worth it. Let me tell you, it's worth it. Come and join us if you speak Spanish. And if you don't speak Spanish and want to get adjusted to the Spanish language, yeah, Armonía Emocional is for you. Armonía Emocional, there are some episodes here. Before we used to be bilingual, remember? And now I separated into two podcasts because I want you to have the experience in one language. And if you feel like the other language, you can go and open Armonía Emocional and go back and forth. And of course, if you want stories and you say, I don't want theory today, Carmen, I just want somebody that made it to something, somebody that was successful at something because I want inspiration. Go and open in Spanish the podcast Inspírame, which I am hosting. Inspírame are stories of people who accomplish something they are proud of and they want to share with us and they want to inspire us. And I am amazed how many beautiful stories and how many wonderful people has come to that podcast. If you are in Facebook, find us in Amigos in Harmony. Amigos in Harmony, there we are. If you are in YouTube, leave us a comment, leave us a like, and subscribe. Bye for now. we have reached the end of another episode of the podcast Emotions in Harmony. See you the next week. Visit www.emotionsinharmony.org, where you can subscribe, find the notes, and be in direct contact with me. Thanks for listening.